Good afternoon, gents. Very happy to talk about fintech today. I do it pretty much as a broad picture. First of all, maybe for those who don't know Passion Capital is a pre-seed and seed stage fund based in London. I have the great pleasure of having started this with two partners. One is Eileen Burbridge. She was 10 years in the Valley at the likes of Apple and Yahoo. Before she moved to Europe and became employee number 3 at Skype, where she was responsible for the product. The other partner is Robert Di Giro, whom I sold back in the dot-com bubble, my online auction company to. So all of us, we are former operators / entrepreneurs. I myself never worked for anybody else than my own company since I've left university, and frankly, actually before. In reality, having changed from the entrepreneur to be the dark side investor, it's a terrible job. Because if you strip out the I from passion and put it in front, it means I pass on, and that is the truth, what we VCs do. We see at Passion roughly 250 deals per month, and we meet physically with 70 or 80. And eventually, on average, we invest in 1.1. That means 249 times a month we have to say no, which is super miserable. Because, of course, we love to say yes. It's way nicer. Other than that, my life is beautiful and the job is beautiful because I feel like I'm in a toy store. Yeah? Tons of young people coming up with fresh new ideas. And luckily, we have been able to raise money and are able to invest in the most promising companies. So what I'm going to cover today are these points. Why now? Why do we talk now about fintech? And probably more relevant, why do we care? Where exactly is all this happening? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And what's happening in the next 12 months? Firstly, let me say this might sound exaggerated, but I truly believe this is actually an understatement. We are witnessing and participating in the 4th industrial revolution. It's a big word, I know this. But when we started with Passion back in 2011, 1/3 of our investments, we have a portfolio of 75 companies, 1/3 of these investments are fintech. And we did the majority of these investments before even the term fintech was coined. What's happening with technology right now is literally an unprecedented shift to market forces, supply and demand, everything changed. I personally started my first company way back in '91, so pre-digital, and it was literally impossible to get any traction outside your hometown, which in my case is Hamburg in northern Germany. It was impossible, that was your network. Fast forward 25 years and you have global platforms, you have everything. You have completely changed consumer behaviors, expectations from the consumers. You have new, different skills needed on the labor market side. We also see specific hubs, as laid out by the previous speakers. 10 years ago, I would have given the advice to an entrepreneur: if you want to start a company in Europe, come to London. 5 years ago, I would have said either stay in Stockholm or move to Berlin or London. Now, frankly, you can do it from wherever you want. You see Tel Aviv, you see Paris, you see London, you see Berlin, you see Vilnius, you see Tallinn, Prague, Amsterdam. It's happening everywhere. And this, let me call it digital revolution, it all started in areas with very small file sizes. Because at the time, the bandwidth and the speed of transportation was quite limited. But what we've seen with news, what we've seen with messaging, photography, commerce, music, content, you name it, everything has already changed, and be sure the same is going to happen to the financial services. Let's have a look at commerce or retail. John Lewis, famous British brand, got founded in, let me see here, 1864. Revenues of about 10 billion. H&M, I mean, I'm not comparing any shitty brands here. H&M is probably one of the most famous brands out there. It took them 70 years to get to 97 billion of revenue. Stellar success story. It took Amazon less than 20 years to outperform them, and the growth numbers are way, way, way faster. So they're not only growing, but they grow in a fraction of the time. This also applies to news and information. 1516, the Royal Mail was founded, so 500 years, a bit more, 501 years ago. And looking to news and information, before Gutenberg invented the printing press, news and information was probably in control of the church. But then for 500 years, more or less everybody was used and got their information via the print. Look on the right side of the chart, we see Google, Facebook, Twitter, to name a few, some of them 18, some of them 10 years old, orders of magnitude bigger than anything the printed revolution has created. Messaging. The peak of the Post, the Royal Mail, was around 2005, 2006 with 84 million messages or items delivered per day. Now they're at around 40, 45 million. SMS was invented as a protocol 25 years ago. Actually, nobody was actually remotely interested in taking on SMS because they all thought it's not going to work and who's going to use this stupid idea of texting messages. It took them 25 years to come to 57 million messages, and WhatsApp achieved in only 7 years double the amount. So what we can learn from here, that we are in this fourth digital industrial revolution, it is not only faster, we in some ways have to deal with something that our brain, our human brain, is not designed to deal with. And that is not linear growth, it is exponential growth. We do actually have a problem in understanding exponential growth. We just cannot get it right. 100 years, more than 100 years after the telco, in my case, so we are based in London, so excuse all the examples, or most of the examples are British examples. 100 years after British Telecom was launched, the first email got sent in 1971. You had 100 years in between this innovation. And then it took 20, 25 years for this whole email thingy picking up. Fast forward another 15 to 20 years, boom, boom, boom. The innovation just got created at a pace, probably starting with the iPhone, with WhatsApp, with Snapchat, with Insta, and you name it. And again, the growth rates of all these services are at an exponential faster rate than anything before. And what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing in the chip manufacturers, so be it Qualcomm or be it ARM, there is no stopping. It just continues. It just doubles every 24 months. Not 18 months anymore. It takes 24 months, but it doubles. It doubles, it doubles, it doubles. Since we're going to talk about fintech, just as a side note, PayPal was invented in 1998. So I think it is time that we see another boom, boom, boom in the financial sector. Very similar to the boom we saw following the mass adoption of SMS. Two more slides, please, for setting the stage of just how massive, how big, how unbelievably big this fourth industrial revolution is. Look at the four horsemen: Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. These four companies have a combined market cap that is 1 times 3 bigger than the DAX 30, which is the 30 biggest companies the whole German economy was able to produce. They are 50% of the 100 biggest UK companies, and you name it. I mean, we are talking about dimensions in the range of the GDP of South Korea. It's just stunning, especially if you look at this new world order shown here. Let me go a little bit into the detail here, because I think you can't read anything on these slides. First line is 2001, the 5 biggest companies by market cap. We see expected one tech company, the green one, which is Microsoft. But the biggest one at the time is GE, Exxon, Citibank. The same is true for 2006. A very similar following in 2011, and see what happened over the last 5 years. Technology has taken over the 5 top spots. These are companies that have something in common. They all started at being a single-purpose company. Microsoft for software for PC, Google as a search engine, Facebook for am I hot or not, or managing a more modern contact list, Amazon for buying books. Single-purpose focused companies. Less than 20 years old. 20 years. We are talking about GE. We are talking about Exxon. These are companies 150 years and older. And these companies, these 5, have kicked them out of the top 5 rating within 20 years. So tell me any logic that the same is not going to happen in any, or let me say, in every other industry, including the financial services. Digital is taking over, software is eating the world. Let's have a bit of a deep dive into financial services. What kind of beast are we talking here? We are talking about an industry that represents around 24% of the global economy. We see 14,000 banks all over the world. And we are not talking about a single institution as a bank. We are talking about the institution in each and every country. We have the Deutsche Bank in Germany. Most of the people think the Deutsche Bank is the central bank. It's an institution. And we see these institutions all over the world, be it in, I don't know, wherever. Interestingly, it's one of the very few sectors, if not the only sector, which is both a one-to-one, so an individualized segment, and mass market. What do I mean by this? Financial services is probably the only one. I can think of food as well, where you more or less deal with yourself and you use a service for it. Think investing, think saving. You take your assets and you invest it for yourself. You save for yourself. So it's an underlying that you use for yourself as much as transferring it to other people. If I transfer money for paying a bill or whatsoever, as much as mass market as it gets, if you think of the relation between the big banks, the city banks, the HSBCs, all these big players on this planet, for their customers, however they define customer. Clearly, it's an overall indicator for global wealth and global health. So it is in a wonderful regulated environment, probably similar only to the music or copyright industry. It's another level, but we are talking about a highly regulated industry here, which is probably the right thing to do to regulate it. The reason we see now this movement since 5-6 years in fintech is actually down to the financial crisis. Digital enabling comes quite often with crisis. Anybody knows why travel, for example, is so far ahead in digital adoption and so on? The reason that travel and Booking.com and all these players is so well advanced is in 9/11. The travel industry completely crashed on 9/11. We had 30–40% less bookings. So this way, the big supply forces have been forced to open up and use other alleys. So they opened up towards digital. They open up towards the players like Priceline, like Last Minute, like all these new services, because they've been screwed. There was no chance. I mean, the industry was gone overnight. The same happened to financial services post-Lehman. Because out of the sudden, what has worked for hundreds of years, the interbanking lending and the trust that the other party is able to fulfill their promises on the next morning, disappeared. It was done. Again, this opens up the opportunities for new players in the market. Now, with this all being established, let me first share my own definition of fintech. So just to limit fintech only and solely to all these startups doesn't make any sense. In fact, the biggest fintech players on the planet are the incumbents and always have been. There's probably a good argument that the financial services have been the first digital industry out there. If you think of an exchange, if you think on the Nasdaq, if you think on the CME, if you think of the Philadelphia Forex market, these are digital enabled products. So the big incumbents, be it insurances, be it banks, they always invested a lot in financial technology. In fact, they invest between 50 and 70 billion per year in their what they call IT. 50 to 70 billion a year. We just learned that in Europe, 1.6 billion got invested in the startup scene so far this year. That's nothing compared to the amounts the incumbents are spending. Maybe a bit of a sideline. Too much money costs creativity. It is not always the most money that wins. Most of the time, it's just very simple. Understanding your customers and deliver a better solution using technology. So it's the incumbents, it's all the SMEs, and it's all the startups / scale-ups. Most evident, or the Brits are clever. Yeah? I live in this country, I live in Britain since 17 years. They are just super smart in not working too hard, but leveraging their strength. And they do it very strategically. They even changed the time zone, or invented the time zone. The reason why we are 1 hour behind to the continent in England is to enable GMT, and GMT is the only time zone on this planet that enables a business in the States and a business in Asia to close a deal during business hours in the same day. It doesn't work on the continent, it doesn't work in Asia, it only solely works in Britain. They are smart dudes, that's for sure. As a result, we see 300 of the world's banks have their headquarters in London. Actually, more big banks' headquarters are in London, American banks, than in New York. We see 4 trillion of foreign exchange through London settled every single day. Every single day, 4 trillion. That is 6 times the GDP of South Korea. Every day. It is stunning. We have a lot of talent and skill. And luckily, post-crisis, the regulators woke up and created the sandbox, an easier way for startups to fulfill the regulatory needs. In short, London has all elements, and sorry for the shameless self-promotion of London here, but it is Silicon Valley. We have in London 300,000 software developers. We have in San Francisco 280,000. We have the Wall Street, and we have Washington, D.C., all within 5 miles. The density of the city is just second to none, if they only would have not fucked up it with the Brexit. I mean, but that's maybe misleading here in this context. Just a very personal note. Huh? I think don't let me go there. Don't let me go there. Fintech challenges. Not everything is gold. I mean, it all looks fantastic. It's the regulatory pace. Even though they created the sandbox, they still struggle with lots of financial innovations. Think crowdfunding. At some point, we're going to see many people losing their £1,000 or dollars investment via crowdfunding. It is going to happen, and it's going to be a PR disaster. We have issues in accepting cryptocurrencies or finding a way dealing with cryptocurrency, with peer-to-peer lending and others, so that there are actually inherent challenges in the whole regulatory space. The brand equity of financial services, they are second to none when it comes to between terrible and awful. Young millennials rather go to the dentist than going to their bank. And the NPS of all big institutions are negative. Just a terrible brand equity when it comes to trust with your finances. We need to keep pace with fraud and bad actors. So we need to be able to protect consumers and businesses. Hence, we need regulation, because it's not just another message you're sending. You're dealing with your future, your wealth, your pension, whatever. What we saw in the last 3-4 years is the starting point of industry division. So it is quite often banks versus startups. And we still have, talking about the last point with the financial inclusion, we still have a lot of unbanked people which should be solved. Coming to the opportunities, if you pay any attention, which I hope, you see these are the same bullet points. I'm an investor, after all, I'm an optimist. So in every challenge, there is a sort of an opportunity. We have seen improvements on the regulation side, and let's hope this continues. Actually, before I go into these points, there is one missing out the word here, there is one structural difference in fintech compared to any other segment when we are talking about the big fight between Asia, US, and Europe, and the race to digital. I think it's fair to say I started my first digital or my first internet company back in '94 or '95, and I'm pleased to say it was a super flop. It was miserable, and it's even worse because I did a print magazine about the internet. Believe it or not, I mean, how can you be so stupid from today's point of view? But that's what I did. Frankly, the Europeans, we didn't get it too right over the last 20 years. It might change in fintech, because we have a structural advantage, at least compared to the US guys. To get a banking license in the States, you need to do this state by state. Facebook, for example, started applying for a banking license back in 2009, and they still have only licenses in 37 countries, or states. They need 51 or 52. Looking at the challenger banks, we have seen in the UK 5 new challenger banks emerging over the last 5 years, 3 years, 3.5 years. And we will see another 10 to 15 over the next 3 years. So there is a structural advantage when it comes to fintech. We are already miles behind the Chinese. The Chinese, if you look to WePay and Alipay, they operate on a different scale. I mean, WePay has 800 million, 670 million active monthly users. Alipay, similar dimensions. Nobody else in the Western world is anywhere close. But luckily for us, they have a different attitude to KYC and AML. KYC is know your customer. AML is anti-money laundering. So I think it's fair to say the threat of the Chinese exporting their WePay and Alipay model towards the Western audience is rather de minimis. The brand equity, yes, they messed it up, the big incumbents, but I think this is a good chance for new players to create a different brand experience, product experience about financial services in not screwing the customers, in just treating them as customers, and just delivering a superior service, like Spotify does for music, or Amazon does for shopping. Cybersecurity can actually help a lot of getting rid and spotting all the fraudsters and bad actors in the space. We do have a good chance for not seeing industry diversion, but industry collaboration. We need people, so skill retraining is a big field. I think we are, in our portfolio, in the fintech space, probably have open positions for over 200 people across the portfolio, and keep in mind we are a seed fund. And technology should be able to solve or help on the financial inclusion side of things. So what's the meaning for the next 12 months in our thinking and passion thinking? B2C is more or less done in financial services. We have seen banks, we have seen lending, we have seen all sorts of stuff around the B2C. Very similar to what we saw with Alta Vista, Yahoo, Google, eBay in the mid-90s. 1999, the first proper B2B startup was founded, which was Salesforce. And we expect the same to happen in financial technology now and over the next 12 to 24 months, much more like delivering the deep plumbing, full stack integrations as a service for the incumbents. Subsectors of fintech is proptech. Proptech is nothing else than fintech, but because most of the time you are financing property. Big one, machine learning, and in rare cases you could even name this artificial intelligence, even though most of the time, 80–90%, it's probably machine learning. We continue to love cybersecurity, and if we can solve a bit of the financial inclusion problem, we are over the moon and happy, as am I, because now it's 20 seconds left. This was well timed. The sun is shining. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so do we have some questions? Questions? Okay. Yes, there's one.
Do you see a lot of action going on in compliance, fintechs or startups?
Yes, it's one of the bullet points. It's all around AML, KYC. It comes with the regulatory needs. And again, I think it's good, like people like Onfido or Passport or others. Yeah, I think this is going to be a booming market. Like the whole identity check and all this stuff. Yeah, if you're in this segment, I'm interested to talk.
So, Stefan, I wanted to ask you a question. So, there's a lot of prediction about how technologies will change future societies, how technologies will change future businesses. But as you mentioned, technologies are progressing exponentially. So, can we really predict the future? And if so, how far?
No, we for sure cannot predict the future. What we can see that we as a society need a different approach towards technology, I think. It is some of the Nobel Prize winners and super experts actually predict that the algorithm will outperform our human algorithms over the next 3 to 5 years. And until this technology then is mass market ready, it might take another 5 years, because initially you need a lot of processing power for this, which has, I mean, implication on all levels. I personally believe we have to fundamentally change our societies. We have to expect that we're going to lose 30 to 40 to 50% of all jobs down to robotics/machine learning, which in itself sounds dramatic, but frankly, 300 years ago, all of us have been on the fields, and now I'm actually quite happy not to be to be on the field. I think we have to find a new model of that you earn your living via work. I think this model has phased out now post-Manchester capitalism. It worked for 200, 250 years. And third of all, we need to make sure that my generation is not the only generation, not only my generation, but plus minus one generation, who had a relatively free life. So I think everything analog becomes digital. Anything digital is trackable. That is not a good setup.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Stefan, thank you, Stefan, so much.
More than welcome. Thank you.